The story opens with an idealistic vision of a new life where sunlight streams in and plans for a small pharmacy to help people are laid out full of promise. However, reality proved much harsher for Nagase Kaoru, a 22-year-old office worker. After countless days buried in work and overtime until exhaustion, her life abruptly concluded late one night, not due to illness or a common traffic accident, but the cause of her demise stemmed from a rare error by a higher power. A space-time distortion caused by two colliding dimensions inadvertently swept her up and removed her existence from Earth. Kaoru awoke in an endless white void, facing a man who introduced himself as the World Administrator God. Instead of panicking or being afraid, the young woman quickly grasped the situation as the deity bowed repeatedly in apology. He explained that to maintain balance between dimensions, he had to close the rifts, and Kaoru was merely an unfortunate victim of a once-in-millennia occurrence. Although her earthly body had perished and was confirmed deceased, her soul and consciousness remained intact. To compensate for this grave error, the deity offered her a new life in another world, a place with a civilization equivalent to medieval Europe, more primitive but still full of potential. Not passively accepting her fate, Kaoru quickly demonstrated the resourcefulness of a seasoned office worker. She not only accepted the offer but also began negotiating for her future. She requested a younger body to adapt more easily and, more importantly, to seek romantic happiness, something she had missed in her previous life. But before turning to a new chapter, Kaoru made a compassionate request. She wished to say goodbye to her family and friends, who were suffering from her sudden and mysterious departure. In her spiritual form, Kaoru returned home, witnessing her parents' grief and her older brother Koichi's distress. She also sought out her close friends, who were tormented by their inability to protect her. With a bit of temporary power, she appeared in their dreams and subconscious, smiling reassuringly that she was fine and embarking on a new, happy journey. These final messages helped those left behind shed their burdens, allowing them to bid her farewell with smiles instead of tears. After fulfilling her wish, Kaoru returned to the White Void, ready for her transmigration. At the transfer station to the New World, Kaoru met Celestine, the administrative goddess of the Other World. Unlike her usual majestic appearance, Celestine was a vibrant, youthful girl, and particularly admired the Earth goddess as a respected senior. Understanding this mindset, Kaoru skillfully utilized the senior-junior relationship to maximize her own advantages. She knew the new world was fraught with peril, filled with monsters and magic, and a seemingly delicate girl like her needed more than just luck to survive. Beginning the process of building her own character, Kaoru rejected combat abilities or destructive magic. With a practical mindset, she realized that in a backward society, medicine was a goldmine and the most robust shield of protection. She requested the ability Potion Cheat, the power to create any kind of potion with arbitrary effects. Not stopping there, she also considered logistical issues. How could a small girl carry goods and money without being robbed? The solution was an item box with infinite capacity, time-stopping properties, and absolute security. Though Celestine was puzzled by these gamer terms, out of respect for the Earth Senior, the goddess still approved everything. Kaoru continued to finalize her reincarnation profile with astonishingly detailed requests. Her body to be rejuvenated to 15 years old, the age of maturity in the new world, to retain the original genes of the Nagase family, and the ability to be fluent in all written and spoken languages. She also didn't forget to research the religious structure of the new world to avoid any issues concerning faith. Celestine confirmed that she was the sole deity, though sometimes a bit lazy in delivering prophecies, but essentially, it was a peaceful religion. In the final moments before reincarnation, the conversation between Kaoru and Celestine grew deeper. Kaoru wondered if a higher entity like a deity truly possessed human-like emotions. Celestine smiled and revealed an interesting truth. To be able to communicate equally with Kaoru, she had to lower her intellect and processing speed to a limited level. For Celestine, this experience was not unpleasant at all. On the contrary, it brought a simple joy that she couldn't attain in her omnipotent state. Mutual respect between human and deity had been established, opening the door for Kaoru to step into the new world with her head held high, fully equipped with the most supreme weapons to live the carefree and happy life she had always wished for. The moment of parting between the two worlds was not tinged with sorrow. Instead, it radiated understanding and connection. Kaoru, with a radiant smile and determined eyes, did what few would dare to do before a deity. She proposed friendship. For Celestine, the deity governing the other world, who was inherently solitary in her omnipotence, that proposal was more precious than any offering. The promise of a friendship across dimensions was established, becoming the most steadfast spiritual provision for Kaoru as she officially stepped into the new world, Verni. Setting foot in the strange land, Kaoru immediately faced the reality of her transmigration. Soleil's had kept her promise, a vibrant, youthful body of a 15-year-old. However, a heartbreaking truth quickly dawned on Kaoru as she inspected her new body. Her bust size had been severely nerfed from a B cup to an A cup. Despite her attempts to console herself that this was a rare status symbol, a hilariously optimistic mindset, she couldn't help but feel utterly disappointed. Pushing aside her sorrow over her physique, Kaoru began to check her most important survival tools, her potion creation ability, and her item box. Everything worked smoothly, from the sports energy drink conjured out of thin air to the infinite storage, though occasionally a sold-out notification would pop up like a cosmic joke. Leaving the wilderness, Kaoru headed towards civilization. Along the way, she discovered a passive but rather annoying ability. She could understand the language of all animals. Hearing the voices of small creatures made the world around her noisier and somewhat more frightening than she had imagined, prompting her to quickly seek out human settlements. Standing before the ancient city gates, her survival instincts kicked in. Kaoru knew that without money, she couldn't survive. She quickly created a batch of recovery potions, 3 blue vials, low grade, and 1 yellow vial, mid grade, ready for her first entrepreneurial venture. However, the marketplace was not as simple as she thought. Entering the Hunters Guild with a rumbling stomach and hopes of selling potions to earn lodging money, Kaoru was met with a harsh reality. She was flat out rejected, even considered foolish for bringing potions to sell in a place meant for fighters instead of a pharmacy or clinic. But in every misfortune, there's a silver lining. Kaoru learned crucial intelligence. Both the town's only doctor and pharmacist were absent. This was her golden opportunity for a niche market. Despite being sternly warned by a female staff member about the absolute prohibition of illicit activities to earn money, Kaoru was still permitted to conduct small-scale business within the guild hall. With her quick wit and skilled massage techniques from her previous life, originally used to serve her parents, she quickly won the favor of the hunters. From selling her labor for food, she gradually transitioned to accepting coins, saving every single penny for her dream of settling down and establishing a career. Her peace didn't last long before trouble struck. A group of frantic hunters carried a severely injured comrade into the guild hall. The man's left arm was terribly mangled by a grizzly bear attack, bleeding profusely, and the doctor's absence made the situation critical. Shouts of pain and panic filled the air. Realizing that a life hung by a thread and the crude first aid measures of the locals were insufficient, Kaoru decided to act. Despite the suspicion and objections from those around her about wasting precious medicine on an ordinary hunter, she resolutely pulled out the yellow potion, a mid-grade pharmaceutical capable of regenerating tissue and bone. Kaoru didn't just administer the potion. She performed a swift and decisive emergency procedure that left everyone stunned. The potion's effectiveness, stemming from Celes's power, was undeniable. The horrific wound closed, the pain vanished, and life returned to the victim's eyes. It was a true miracle in an ordinary world. But immediately after that glorious moment, Kaoru realized her fatal error. She had revealed too great a power, a miraculous healing potion that didn't exist in this world, witnessed by too many people. The crowd's adoring and astonished gazes sent shivers down her spine. She had broken the stay hidden rule she had set for herself. Rumors spread like wildfire. The next morning, as Kaoru was packing her belongings to quietly leave town and avoid trouble, trouble found its way to her door. The baron who governed this land, a greedy noble known for arbitrarily raising taxes to advance his career, had heard about the miracle girl. He wouldn't miss the chance to turn her into a golden goose for his political ambitions. 5 large soldiers blocked the small girl's path, carrying a forced summons. Although Kaoru tried to play the role of an innocent girl, citing her mother's warning not to go with strangers and asserting that she was not a citizen under the baron's jurisdiction, the logic of the powerful always prevailed. The lead soldier roughly grabbed her arm and dragged her away, ignoring her weak resistance. Kaoru was forced to follow them, mentally planning her escape for when the opportunity arose. But the soldier's gaze suddenly fell upon a strange object on her wrist, the modern wristwatch she had asked Celeste to create for an alarm. The curiosity in his eyes signaled that Kaoru's journey ahead would not only be a battle of medical skill, but also a tense intellectual struggle against human greed in this new world. Stepping into the Baron's opulent mansion, Kaoru was not overwhelmed by the wealth. On the contrary, she saw through the host's malicious heart in every glance and fake smile. The welcoming party took place in a suffocating atmosphere of machinations. The Baron, with his imposing appearance and cunning smile, made no secret of his ambition to exclusively possess Kaoru, or more precisely, her ability to create miraculous potions. He painted a glorious vision of holding the potion formulas, reaping immense profits, and using them as a stepping stone to a higher title. To him, Kaoru was merely a golden goose, without family or influence, easy prey for him to manipulate at will. However, Kaoru was not the naive 15-year-old girl her appearance suggested. She quickly grasped the situation and decided to make a bold move. Instead of being afraid, she admitted to being the potion maker, but skillfully wove in a tragic story about her late father to legitimize her skills. When the Baron gleefully demanded she demonstrate her abilities right there in the mansion, Kaoru launched her first counterattack. Tearfully, she announced that her unique potion-making kit had been stolen and destroyed. With the acumen of an experienced office worker, she planted a frightening conspiracy theory in the Baron's mind. The one who sabotaged the kit was the one who didn't want the Baron to recover from his injury, the one coveting the title of heir. The finger of suspicion immediately pointed at Rodolphe, the notorious eldest son, plunging the Baron's family into chaos and mutual suspicion. Taking advantage of the turmoil, Kaoru played the role of an unwilling guest, invited to stay at the mansion to repair the kit. A blatant lie, as the kit was completely ruined. She requested to be served by a young maid with a compatible magical wavelength, a nonsensical term but enough to deceive those lacking knowledge of magic. Her true purpose was to eliminate the seasoned observers and keep only an innocent 12-year-old girl, easily outsmarted. As night fell, with the entire mansion asleep and political machinations troubling the Baron, Kaoru began to act. She wasn't simply escaping. With a tit-for-tat mindset, Kaoru decided to punish the Baron's greed with a heist of the century. After gently lulling the young maid to sleep with a sleeping potion, Kaoru activated her item box. She stripped bare everything in the room, from the bed, furniture, and carpets, to precious paintings, and even all the clothes and wardrobe of the Baron's daughter. Not a single candle or tablecloth was left behind. This was not just about gathering resources for her escape, but also a bitter act of revenge against the one who dared to hold her captive. To ensure absolute safety, Kaoru performed a spectacular transformation of her appearance. Her characteristic black hair was cut short, then dyed blonde with a transformation potion. Her dark eyes also changed to emerald green. Donning a maid's outfit taken from her item box, Kaoru confidently walked out of the mansion like an invisible servant at dawn, leaving behind an utterly empty room and a Baron about to go mad from having lost everything. News of the Miracle Potion Girl's disappearance spread like wildfire. The Hunters Guild mobilized its full force, and warrants and search orders were issued everywhere. But ironically, no one was looking for a blonde, green-eyed maid casually strolling through the streets. Kaoru realized that the Baron's mobilization of such a large force would only drag him deeper into legal trouble if the matter leaked outside his territory. She blended into the crowd heading towards the capital, Arras, where she believed the bustle and crowds would be her best shield. However, the life of a fugitive was not easy. Though she had escaped the clutches of the nobility, Kaoru now faced another adversary: poverty. The meager money she had earned from the Hunters Guild earlier paled in comparison to the high cost of living in the city. Standing before stalls fragrant with the smell of grilled meat, the young girl painfully realized she didn't have enough money for a decent meal if she wanted to save for lodging. Survival instinct compelled her to use the treasure she had acquired. Choosing a secluded antique shop, Kaoru, posing as a poor maid selling items for her master, successfully offloaded a silver candlestick taken from the Baron's mansion. The 6 silver coins earned brought immense joy, temporarily resolving her financial crisis. But that joy was short-lived as she calculated the cost of living in the capital. Rent was far more expensive than in the countryside, and the money from selling antiques was just a drop in the ocean if she wanted to stay long-term. Deciding to save as much as possible, Kaoru chose to camp in the forest instead of renting luxurious lodging. Amidst the wild nature, by a cool waterfall, she found a rare moment of peace after stressful days of mental struggle. But fate seemed unwilling to let her rest for long. From afar, the clatter of horse-drawn wheels echoed, breaking the forest's tranquility. A luxurious, noble carriage was approaching, carrying unfamiliar guests looking for a place to stop. Was this an opportunity or a new trouble waiting to befall this resourceful pharmacist girl? Kaoru's escape journey paused in a dense forest, where she decided to enjoy a bit of luxury by dragging out the comfortable bed stolen from the Baron's house into nature to have a good sleep. However, the tranquility didn't last long when a group of strangers appeared, shattering the goddess's sleep. Facing the group, which included a blonde knight named Francette and mysterious men, Kaoru was quickly mistaken for the goddess Celestine. Not wanting to get involved in trouble, but also needing to maintain a disguise for self-protection, Kaoru came up with a bold idea. She denied being Celes but claimed to be a close friend of the deity from another world. To legitimize her dispensing of miracles, which were actually medicines, she requested a peculiar exchange. Tell her a sad story so she could shed tears and create goddesses' tears. While the men were flustered by this strange request, Francette, the 27-year-old royal knight, stepped forward with a heavy heart. Her story was not a bloody war tragedy, but the loneliness of a woman who had sacrificed her entire youth for swordsmanship. While her peers had settled down and started families, she remained solitary, her hands rough and calloused from holding a sword so much, never having known the touch of a man's hand. The deep empathy between these single women touched Kaoru's heart. She decided to give them powerful potions, a red potion specifically for Francette, and a yellow potion capable of curing all ailments for the grandmother, which was the group's cover story. After finishing her act, Kaoru hurriedly left, leaving the group still astonished by the miracle that had just descended. In another, lighter development, Kaoru also didn't forget to resolve the aftermath of the heist of the century at the Baron's house. She secretly returned the stolen maid's outfit along with a strange potion for the unlucky maid who was being blamed. With the message, "Drink immediately to avoid being robbed," the poor girl closed her eyes and drank the suspicious liquid. The results were truly wonderful. Not only did the Baron forgive her debt because his belongings were recovered, but the maid also underwent a transformation with smooth, fair skin and lustrous hair, thanks to the potion's side effects. Rumors of Angel Kaoru bringing aid and relief began to spread among the servants, becoming a new legend. As Kaoru continued her journey, the seeds she had sown began to sprout, sending shockwaves through a neighboring kingdom. In Gurua, the capital of the Balmoa kingdom, the true identities of the group in the forest were revealed. The young man accompanying Francette was none other than Roland, the elder brother of the current King Serge. The atmosphere in the court was as tense as a bowstring, as Francette presented the potions amidst the suspicion of the assembled nobles. The truth about the royal tragedy was revealed. Roland, once expected to become a great king, had permanently lost his right arm and renounced the throne to protect his younger brother in an accident years ago. Now, Kaoru's golden potion was the last hope. Despite all risks, Roland drank the potion completely, and a miracle occurred. His disabled arm moved again, to the extreme astonishment and bursting tears of King Serge and the entire court. But what was even more shocking was the effect of the red potion Francette drank. She was not only enhanced, but also rejuvenated to the age of 16, the most vibrant age of one's life, exactly fulfilling her secret wish for lost youth that she had yearned for. However, these subsequent political developments took an amusingly awkward turn. King Serge, overjoyed, wanted to return the throne to his elder brother, but Roland, with his free-spirited and somewhat mischievous nature, flatly refused. He declared his desire to live a carefree life and kicked the responsibility back to his poor younger brother. Roland decided to choose Francette, now a beautiful 16-year-old maiden who still retained her supreme combat skills, as his personal knight, opening a new, promising, and romantic chapter for both of them, even as the knightess herself was still extremely bewildered by her new appearance. Concluding the monumental changes she had unintentionally caused, Kaoru was now calmly sitting in a merchant's carriage, heading towards the capital Arras of the Brancat kingdom. She tried to learn about this world through the merchant's son but was quickly disappointed by his limited knowledge. Instead, she turned to learning about geography. The kingdoms of Brancat, Balmoa, and Ashid were allies in the southern part of the peninsula, while the northern military empire was separated by a rugged mountain range, and there was also the small holy land of Rueda. Kaoru smiled contentedly with the information she had gathered, completely unaware that she had just saved a prince's life, restored a knight's honor, and overturned the political order of an entire kingdom with just a few impromptu potions. After escaping the clutches of the greedy baron and saving the honor of the neighboring royal family, Nagase Kaoru set foot in the capital Arras of the Brancott kingdom. Despite possessing the power of a divine companion, the young girl maintained a realistic, even pragmatic mindset. To survive in a big city, one needs money. Without hesitation, she sold off the temporarily borrowed tea set and decorative plates from the baron's house to a merchant, earning a meager sum enough to pay for lodging for a few days. However, Kaoru understood that selling stolen goods was not a long-term strategy, and selling divine potions would be an even more suicidal move after the recent troubles. She decided to hide herself under the most ordinary guise possible, a waitress at a common eatery. But fate, it seemed, would not allow Kaoru to live an unremarkable life. At the eatery, she accidentally overheard the story of an old man troubled by how to fairly divide his inheritance between his two grandchildren. Using simple logical thinking from the modern world, Kaoru offered a suggestion. Let one person divide the assets into two parts, and the other person has the right to choose first. That fair and reasonable solution made the little waitress's reputation spread like wildfire. Not missing the opportunity, Kaoru immediately started her consulting service after work, at an exorbitant price, 5 small silver coins for a single piece of advice. From measuring the height of 2 ancient trees using their shadows, to comparing the volume of a god statue using Archimedes' principle, Kaoru's wisdom smoothly resolved all the city residents' concerns. Her popularity quickly attracted the attention of 3 special guests. First, Prince Fernand, Prime Minister Fabio's son, and Grand Minister Alain's son. The 3 young men, who were close school friends, were traveling incognito to seek a bit of freedom outside the palace, were drawn by the bustling and unusual atmosphere of the eatery where Kaoru worked. Here, the powerful trio witnessed a classic lesson. When a merchant named Boomin brought his son Charles to seek advice on handling complaining customers, Kaoru presented a business philosophy that went against all the norms of that era. She asserted that customers were not deities to be blindly worshipped, but equal partners. She taught the young man to ignore unreasonable troublemakers and focus on serving genuine customers, and absolutely never yield to extortion. The little girl's sharp, humane words and modern management thinking left the 3 young nobles stunned. They realized this was no ordinary girl. Unable to contain their curiosity and admiration, Alain's group decided to spend 5 silver coins to test Kaoru's abilities. They posed a challenging problem of macroeconomic scale in the form of a hypothetical question. How can a noble's territory increase its income in a short period? For conventional feudal thinking, the answer was usually to raise taxes or reclaim barren land. But Kaoru, with the confident smile of a 21st century office worker, offered a shocking solution: tax reduction. Despite the 3 young men's skepticism, Kaoru calmly painted a macroeconomic picture. She explained that reducing agricultural taxes would allow farmers to have money to purchase better tools, thereby increasing productivity and saving time. That free time would be used to produce handicrafts or gather forest products, creating an abundant supply of goods. Furthermore, reducing commercial taxes would transform the territory into a magnet, attracting merchants from neighboring regions. Although the tax rate would be lower, with the enormous volume of transactions and the bustling market, the lord's total income would undoubtedly skyrocket, not to mention the general prosperity of the people. That sharp economic theory was like a splash of cold water on the outdated management thinking of Fernand and his friends. They were stunned to realize the intellect of the small girl before them far surpassed even the seasoned officials in the royal court. A young waitress could eloquently speak about monetary flow, behavioral psychology, and macroeconomic management. This was beyond their comprehension. In an instant, admiration transformed into a strong desire to acquire such talent. Both Fernand and Alain blurted out their desire to have her, leading to an awkward and comical misunderstanding as they were suspected of having inappropriate interest in children. Meanwhile, Kaoru was completely unaware that she had just lectured the future kingdom's most powerful figures. She was simply enjoying the pleasure of earning money with her own intellect, delighted by the jingling silver coins in her pocket. She was proud that she was living well without needing to use Silas's deceptive powers. Arts, she Forgetting that possessing the mind of a modern adult within the body of a 15-year-old girl in a medieval world is the greatest cheat she has. Kaoru's peaceful days at the Full Belly Pavilion Eatery were quickly shattered by the persistent appearances of Prince Fernand. No longer maintaining any distance or minimal courtesy, Fernand constantly pestered Kaoru right during her work hours, treating her as a living database rather than a human being. His nuisance escalated to the point of disturbing other customers and waitresses, pushing Kaoru, who usually maintained a professional demeanor, to the limit of her patience. With unprecedented firmness, she bluntly refused to serve him and banned Fernand from the premises, an action that left the arrogant prince, who had never heard the word no in his life, stunned and humiliated. Fernand's absence over the following 3 weeks seemed to restore peace for Kaoru, giving her time to enjoy her days off at the library and research the stability of the kingdom of Brancott. But Kaoru, with the keen intuition of someone who has weathered many hardships, understood that this was merely the calm before the storm. That intuition was quickly validated when a luxurious carriage pulled up in front of the shop and a mysterious package was surreptitiously delivered to the neighboring house, though it was clearly intended for her. Kaoru, with both cunning and caution, decided to ignore the package containing the formal dress and shoes, accepting only the royal party invitation that was handed directly to her. She understood that if she accepted the dress, she would be walking into the lion's den as a pawn in a prearranged scheme. Instead, she chose a bolder move, to walk upright into the palace, not to flee or submit, but to face the trouble head-on and end it once and for all. She prepared everything within her item box, from money to provisions, mentally ready to make an escape immediately after the party. The royal party took place amidst luxury and splendor, yet the center of attention was a petite girl in a maid outfit, looking out of place amidst a sea of evening gowns. Kaoru's appearance terrified Viscount Alman, the one responsible for sending the items, while Fernand could not hide his shock. When questioned about her attire, Kaoru calmly replied with sharp logic. She had only received the invitation, while the other package was delivered to the wrong address, so she had no right to touch it. That nonchalant answer was a slap in the face to the nobility's clumsy scheming, while simultaneously affirming her status as a guest who would not be controlled. However, Fernand made a reckless move by suddenly announcing to all the guests that Kaoru was his fiancée. That shocking declaration caused the entire room to hold its breath, but for Kaoru, it was the final straw. A dark vision of noble life flashed through her mind. A gilded cage where she would have to smile and speak falsely, bear children as a diplomatic duty, and completely lose her personal freedom. She furiously confronted Fernand, exposing the truth that he cared nothing for her feelings or her as a person, but only coveted the intellect and knowledge she possessed. Fernand, in a panic and stubbornness, inadvertently admitted it, stating that to him, her intelligence was all he needed. The climax erupted when Kaoru, with eyes blazing with determination, did something no one could have imagined. She flung the plate in her hand to the floor, the shattering ceramic echoing and tearing through the suffocating atmosphere. Not stopping there, she allowed the shards to cut her, fresh blood staining her skin, creating a horrifying yet tragic spectacle. Amidst the crowd's dread, Kaoru smiled, a challenging and bitter smile. She declared that with these scars she had become ugly and foolish, a useless individual no longer of value to the prince. Her act of self-harm to protect her freedom was a fatal blow, causing the honor of the royal family and Fernand to crumble in an instant. Taking advantage of the chaos, Kaoru quickly departed the palace. As soon as she was out of sight, she immediately took a healing potion. The terrible wounds vanished as if they had never existed. It was all a perfect act to sever the ties of power. She reunited with her companion, handing over provisions and money as promised, before turning her back and walking away decisively. Fernand was left behind, kneeling and enduring the reprimand of his family and friends for his foolishness, while Kaoru, with a proud smile and a free heart, officially escaped from the kingdom of Brancott, closing a tumultuous chapter to open new horizons. The spectacular escape from the royal palace concluded with a moment of tranquility amidst nature. Beneath the shaded trees, Kaoru, now back in her familiar maid's attire, tilted her head back and drank the healing potion. The self-inflicted wounds, created to sever the forced connection, quickly vanished, restoring her flawless skin. The young girl's eyes gleamed with determination mixed with a hint of mischief. She knew that the recent dramatic act was enough to terrify Prince Fernand and the entire kingdom of Brancott, paving the way for her absolute freedom. Unburdened, Kaoru headed straight for the border, her destination being the capital Gurua of the neighboring kingdom of Balmoa, a new land full of promise. On her long journey to the unfamiliar land, Kaoru was fortunate to get a ride from a kind merchant. Not wanting to incur debt and also to save money, she decided to pay him with her most valuable asset, knowledge from the modern world. Rocking on the horse-drawn carriage across the arid lands, the petite girl began an intensive crash course in macroeconomics. She spoke eloquently about business strategies that had never existed in this world, from artificial price reductions to stimulate demand, to price increases on weekends when demand was high, to the art of customer psychology. The merchant, initially listening out of amusement, gradually went from one surprise to another. The sharp business philosophies of the 15-year-old girl opened up a new world for him, instilling in him deep respect. Time flew by, and several years had passed since Kaoru first set foot in Balmoa. In that quiet flow of time, the story brings us back to an old kindness. In a place she once passed through, Joshua, the son of the gatekeeper who had helped Kaoru years ago, suffered a tragic accident that caused him to lose sight in one eye, with the other gradually dimming. The young man's life was plunged into darkness and despair, until a mysterious package arrived from a stranger. Inside the rustic wooden box were vials of medicine and a brief letter. Without a moment's hesitation, the father gave his son the strange liquid to drink. A miracle had occurred. Joshua's eyes not only regained their sight, but even his scars vanished without a trace. Amidst the gatekeeper's family's outpouring of tears in a distant place, Kaoru smiled serenely. She had repaid her debt of gratitude, continuing to affirm her principles of fairness and kindness. In the bustling capital of Gurua, Kaoru began a new life under the guise of a janitor at Aviri Company, a renowned research facility that was, in reality, a den of eccentric scientists. Stepping into the cluttered room reeking of chemicals and stale food, she couldn't help but grimace at the sight of geniuses like Asher, Carlos, and Alvin living like wild men, unbathed, forgetting to eat or sleep, and completely oblivious to social etiquette. Refusing to live in a dump, Kaoru rolled up her sleeves and re-established order. With her masterful domestic skills and delicious meals, she quickly tamed these slovenly men, becoming the facility's reluctant but powerful nanny. However, the biggest problem with this research group was that they only knew how to burn through money on experiments without generating any profit. Recognizing the potential in Asher, a nobleman by birth but passionate about science, Kaoru devised a daring money-making scheme. She leveraged her cunning abilities to create transparent, exquisitely crafted glass bottles, to an extent unimaginable in this world, under the pretense of them being handmade products from an acquaintance. With her sharp marketing acumen, she instructed Asher to market these bottles as high-end wine decanters exclusively for the nobility. The plan was a resounding success. The bottles sold for exorbitant prices, 3 gold coins, bringing in enormous funds for the facility without anyone suspecting their true origin. Her peaceful life didn't last long before Kaoru felt the urge to get back to business. She realized she needed an information network to protect herself and keep abreast of world affairs. The opportunity arose when she encountered a group of street children attempting to pick her pocket. Instead of punishing them, she saw great potential in them. With an air of authority mixed with a touch of mystery, she won over the children, promising them food, health, and a purpose in life. The junior intelligence organization, bearing the cheesy name The Goddess's Eyes, though Kaoru vehemently opposed the name, to no avail, was officially established. She taught them how to gather information, how to blend in, and most importantly, she taught them about self-respect. She healed their ailments, transforming the sickly children into agile operatives, absolutely loyal to Big Sister. A crisis arose when the Goddess's Eyes network reported an emergency. The daughter of a wealthy merchant was gravely ill. Interestingly, this merchant was the very kind man who had given her a ride years ago. Unable to ignore it, Kaoru decided to act. She donned a mask, assumed a mysterious persona, and sought out his mansion in the dead of a night. Stepping into the room heavy with the scent of medicine, Kaoru met the desperate gaze of the merchant keeping vigil by his daughter's bedside. When she spoke, the man was stunned. Though her face was concealed, her voice and demeanor were unmistakable. "Kaoru-chan," he uttered in utter astonishment. Before he could recover his composure, Kaoru signaled her people to bring the miraculous medicine. In front of everyone present, the young patient drank the entire vial. Her complexion regained its color, her breathing became steady, and once again, the miracle named Kaoru saved a life. The moment the merchant realized his benefactor was not only a business genius, but also a living angel, Kaoru understood that no matter how much she tried to hide, the radiance of her kindness and talent would always shine brightly, drawing her into the troubles, yet meaningful experiences of this world. The story began with a strange incident at the mansion of a wealthy merchant. When medicine had given up on his beloved daughter's incurable illness, a mysterious masked figure appeared in the dead of night. Without elaborate rituals, with just a small vial of medicine, the uninvited guest pulled the young girl back from the brink of death, leaving the entire merchant family overwhelmed with happiness. When the mask was removed, the merchant was stunned to realize his benefactor was none other than Kaoru, the young girl he once knew. Though revered as a savior with the title Angel Sama, Kaoru firmly refused all excessive adoration. She only wished to be treated as a normal merchant, the Kaoru of yesterday. To legitimize her free healing without devaluing herself, she cleverly applied the philosophy of exchanging gratitude learned from a poor doctor, accepting gifts in kind, according to one's means instead of money, thus maintaining her integrity while secretly building a network of goodwill for her future plans. Rumors of a mysterious goddess began to spread through every corner of the capital, becoming the hottest topic of discussion in taverns and on street corners. People whispered to each other that the goddess bestowed blessings upon those with kind hearts and turned her back on dark souls. Time flew by, and 2 weeks after that shocking event, life at the Mayaru research workshop seemed to remain peaceful. But undercurrents of emotion began to stir in people's hearts. Asher, the young nobleman more passionate about science than his title, had been exhibiting very strange behaviors lately. He frequently observed Kaoru in secret, his gaze so intent that the young girl couldn't help but notice. Rose-tinted speculations began to form in Kaoru's mind. Could this young man have fallen for her? A vision of a simple life in the small workshop, growing old together and raising a family, suddenly appeared in her mind. Though it wasn't a passionate, lightning-strike love, that sense of peace wasn't a bad choice for a soul that had experienced too many upheavals like hers. The tension reached its peak when Asher, with a flushed face and unprecedented seriousness, arranged to meet Kaoru privately to discuss something important. Her heart pounded, Kaoru held her breath, awaiting the confession she was certain was about to be uttered. And then, the words rang out, "Will you be my fiancé?" Emotions overflowed. Kaoru couldn't hold back tears of joy, nodding in agreement, to the astonishment of those witnessing. But her joy was short-lived as Asher hastily added a fatal caveat. Just pretend for 1 day. It turned out it was all just a terrible misunderstanding. From the peak of her dreams, she plunged into the abyss of reality. Kaoru shifted from shyness to indignation. She demanded a satisfactory explanation for this emotional manipulation. Asher was being forced by his father to attend the birthday party of his elder brother Cedric, the family heir, with the underlying purpose of finding a spouse. To escape the love trap set by his family and continue his passion for research, he needed a living shield, and Kaoru was the most perfect candidate. After hearing the full story, though she feigned annoyance outwardly, deep down, Kaoru realized this was the golden opportunity she had been waiting for. A party gathering high society nobles was the perfect stage for her social debut, to seek stronger patrons for her future. However, with the sharp mind of an experienced individual, she presented a prerequisite. She would not play the role of a fiancé, but merely a woman being pursued by Asher. This ambiguous status was just enough to help Asher escape trouble, while also preserving Kaoru's freedom to pursue other potential prospects if necessary. To prepare for this sensational debut, Kaoru sought out Johann Aviri, the powerful guild president she had once assisted. Hearing that his benefactor wished to attend the party, Johann couldn't hide his excitement. He generously offered to mobilize all of his company's resources to prepare the most splendid formal attire for her, even revealing that he himself was an honored guest at the party. A perfect plan was devised. Johann would provide the attire and carriage, but at the party, he would pretend not to know Kaoru to avoid unnecessary complications regarding her identity while observing her performance from afar. While preparing, Kaoru also grew curious about a strange trend spreading from the neighboring country. High-ranking noblewomen were competing to marry lower-ranking nobles. Although the reason was unclear, her intuition told her that the upcoming party would be more than just dining and dancing. The momentous day finally arrived. Viscount Leotal's mansion glowed with lights and bustled with luxurious carriages. Asher stood amidst the crowd, beads of sweat on his forehead, his anxious eyes scanning for his companion. He feared Kaoru would change her mind at the last minute, or worse, encounter trouble on the way. But then, all the commotion suddenly subsided as the grand doors opened. Kaoru entered, not in the simple attire of a commoner girl, but resplendent like a princess stepping out of a fairy tale. Her pristine white evening gown accentuated her graceful, mysterious beauty, drawing all eyes towards her. Whispers and murmurs rose incessantly. People speculated she was a princess traveling incognito from some distant kingdom. However, contrary to her elegant, refined appearance that made many young men want to approach but dared not due to fear of etiquette, Kaoru's actions left everyone stunned. Skipping the social greetings with the host of the party, Viscount Leotal, the mysterious princess, immediately turned on her heel and headed straight for the food counter. With an air of utter nonchalance, Kaoru began her mission of devouring the delicious dishes, completely ignoring the jaw-dropping stares of the servants and nobles around her. She calmly savored the delicacies, creating an invisible barrier that deterred anyone attempting to strike up a conversation. In Kaoru's eyes at that moment, filling her hungry stomach was more important than any empty social ritual, and this very defiant unconventionality made her appear more unique and elusive than ever in the eyes of the upper class. Stepping into the Lyodal family's grand hall, Kaoru immediately became the center of all attention. In a pristine white evening gown, exquisitely tailored, paired with a luxurious pearl necklace and an elegant hair ornament, she exuded the aura of a noble foreign princess. Her appearance caused the noble crowd to buzz with whispers. No one dared believe that such a beautiful young woman was accompanying Asher, the second son who was known only for burying himself in his studies. However, completely contrary to her ethereal and refined appearance, Kaoru's next action left everyone stunned. Ignoring all empty social rituals, she headed straight for the food area. With an air of utter nonchalance, she began to enjoy the dishes, completely disregarding the jaw-dropping stares of the servants and guests. For Kaoru, filling her empty stomach with the delicacies of the upper class was more important than any artificial greeting. Asher, who was sweating profusely from anxiety, was compelled to step forward and introduce his unwilling companion. When asked about her background, Kaoru smiled calmly and introduced herself as a commoner named Kaoru, with no family name, and came here just to compare cuisines. That answer, so frank it was almost naive, coupled with her declaration of a family tradition of finding love on their own instead of arranged marriages, created a minor ripple of shock. The nobility, accustomed to political machinations, were suddenly drawn to the sincerity and mystery of this unfamiliar girl. Kaoru's attention was quickly caught by an interesting sight. A long line of elegant young ladies were queuing to present gifts to Cedric, Asher's elder brother and the guest of honor, hoping to catch the heir's eye. A haughty blonde noblewoman approached, uttering a sarcastic remark upon seeing Kaoru empty-handed. But instead of being flustered, Kaoru saw through the clumsy concern hidden beneath that arrogant veneer. She smiled in response, a much bolder plan having formed in her mind than merely presenting insignificant jewelry. She declared her intention to greet Cedric and his parents, and of course, she would not come empty-handed. Standing before Cedric, Kaoru made a strange request that left everyone stunned. She wished to meet Calvin, his personal aide. Calvin was Cedric's childhood friend, bodyguard, and closest brother figure. However, during an incident where he sacrificed himself to protect his master from a grizzly bear, Calvin suffered a permanent injury to his left leg, forcing him to retire to general duties. Calvin's injury was Cedric's greatest psychological scar, an unending remorse that left him constantly burdened by guilt. As Calvin emerged with a limping gait, the atmosphere in the hall grew somber. But Kaoru did not let the sorrow linger. She spoke loudly and clearly, transforming the party space into a sacred ceremony. Kaoru praised Calvin's loyalty and called upon everyone to pray. She skillfully guided the crowd's emotions, turning them into witnesses and participants in the miracle about to unfold. If everyone believes this man deserves the goddess's blessing, raise your right hand. Her powerful call resonated. As hundreds of hands rose, creating a powerful resonant atmosphere, Kaoru activated her power. From a glass vial disguised as jewelry, She poured out a dark red liquid, actually a high-grade healing potion derived from Celes's power. Before the entire nobility, Calvin tremblingly drank the entire glass. The miracle happened instantly. The legs once considered ruined suddenly glowed, muscles regenerated, and the sensation of paralysis vanished. Calvin stood up and walked steadily, to the utter astonishment of himself and those around him. Cedric rushed to embrace his lifelong friend, tears streaming down as the burden of years of guilt was lifted. The entire hall erupted in applause and amazement, witnessing a true miracle in everyday life. The next morning, Asher woke up at Kaoru's house with a pounding headache and memories of the party flooding back like a nightmare. He frantically questioned Kaoru about what she had done. Publicly healing a permanent injury in front of hundreds of nobles was like throwing a giant boulder into a calm lake. But Kaoru, casually preparing breakfast at this moment, appeared strangely calm. She explained to Asher her philosophy that the most dangerous place is the safest place. Kaoru argued that if she secretly provided healing, she would be suspected and pursued by those who wished to monopolize her power. But by performing it openly under the guise of the goddess's blessing and the resonance from the crowd's prayers, she transformed her power into a semi-public religious phenomenon. Now, anyone who wished to monopolize her would have to face public opinion and other factions. She had created a balance of power, where information about her spread so widely that no family, not even the royal family, dared to act unilaterally or aggressively. Asher was stunned to realize that behind his friend's innocent appearance and impulsive actions lay a sharp, politically calculating mind. At the Lyodel family mansion, Asher's father was shouting for an explanation, signaling that Kaoru's peaceful life had officially ended, giving way to national-level political turmoil, which she was ready to embrace. Following the shocking event at the Lyodel family's party, the atmosphere in the grand hall seemed to freeze as Calvin tremblingly drank the deep red liquid. Before the gaze of hundreds of noble eyes, a miracle truly descended. Calvin's legs, once considered ruined, could not only move but also stand firm and bend flexibly as if they had never been injured. Cedric, the family heir, burst into tears, embracing his kindred spirit, his loyal bodyguard, whom he once thought he would have to protect for life due to a sense of guilt. The sobbing cries, calling out each other's names between the two grown men, tore through the glamorous artificial facade often seen in high society, leaving behind the rawest and most genuine emotion. While the crowd was still stunned by the unbelievable medical feat, Kaoru quietly retrieved the empty bottle and retreated into the shadows. She smiled inwardly with satisfaction, revealing the secret behind the design of the potion bottles. The elaborate ornaments attached to the caps or bodies of the bottles were actually detachable disguises, leaving behind a plain, ordinary glass vial to conceal her cheating ability to create items from thin air. For Asher, the young man who had brought Kaoru to the party, this moment was both glorious and full of regret. He realized he had missed a golden opportunity to propose to this angel before she was noticed by other powers. Nevertheless, playing the role of a temporary fiancé for a day was enough to give him an excuse to refuse other arranged marriages, claiming his heart already belonged to a girl in the future. The next morning, sunlight shone upon a rather awkward situation. Achille woke up with a pounding headache, not in his luxurious mansion, but right on Kaoru's floor. It turned out that, too afraid to face his father's interrogation after the shocking display last night, he had hidden away at her house. Kaoru, with a calm, almost cold demeanor, was preparing breakfast and not at all surprised by the uninvited guest's presence. Here, an unspoken agreement was established. Kaoru assigned Achille an important task, to become her shield and sole intermediary with the nobility. She fabricated a story about being a noblewoman from a distant land fleeing political schemes, and Achille was the only one she trusted in this country. Returning to the Lyodel mansion, Achille immediately faced his father's wrath. Viscount Lyodel, though furious that his son dared to flee, quickly realized the unique position his family now held. Achille becoming the sole bridge to the goddess's emissary was both an immense honor and an immeasurable danger. They understood that now, not only the great families but also the royal family would intensely pursue that mysterious girl. To protect Kaoru, and also to protect themselves, Achille was forced to play the role of a stern gatekeeper, refusing all inquiries and keeping her whereabouts secret. However, the Lyodel family's protective wall could not stop the supreme command from the royal palace. A messenger bearing an urgent summons compelled Kaoru to make a decision. Instead of appearing as an angel or a foreign noble, she chose a more humble and secure approach, to meet the king as a commoner, entering through a side gate early in the morning to avoid attention. But this very caution thrust her into a tragedy of bureaucratic corruption. At the city gate, Kaoru was stopped by arrogant gate guards. They didn't believe a girl dressed in ordinary clothes had an appointment with the king and demanded a permit, something the royal family had negligently failed to prepare, assuming she would arrive by noble carriage through the main gate. The situation quickly escalated as the guards revealed their despicable nature. An old guard with a sinister smile made a repulsive offer: either pay a bribe or follow him to a secluded spot for a trade using her body. This insult was the final straw for Kaoru. Exploding in anger, Kaoru loudly declared a solemn oath right before the palace gate. She swore in the name of the goddess that she would never again set foot in this defiled place, never meet the king, nor obey any commands from the royalty or nobility of this country. That oath, uttered by one possessing divine power, was nothing short of a death sentence for her diplomatic relationship with the kingdom. Kaoru turned and fled, leaving behind bewildered guards and a golden opportunity shattered by the corruption of those guarding the gate. Meanwhile, at Mayal's workshop, Ashil was stunned as Kaoru recounted the events. He couldn't believe his efforts to protect her had crumbled simply due to the depravity of a petty guard. News of the incident quickly reached the king. He was shocked to realize the fatal error in the reception arrangements. Although he severely punished the guards, the king understood that spilled water cannot be recovered. The angel's oath had created a permanent barrier between her and the royal family. As the royal gates closed, the gates of other troubles opened. The Balmoa Church, a powerful yet calculating religious force, had begun to act. Bishop Salzin and his followers didn't believe in the existence of a new angel, as the goddess Celestine had been silent for the past 50 years. They considered Kaoru either a fraud or a lucrative tool to manipulate believers. A church carriage, led by the arrogant fat priest Dorn, pulled up sharply in front of Mayal's workshop. Dorn, with a condescending attitude, ordered Kaoru to follow him to the temple on the bishop's command. But he had chosen the wrong person to intimidate. Kaoru flatly refused with a scornful smile. She exposed the hypocrisy of the priests, accusing them of vile acts, coercing young girls into the inner sanctum to satisfy their desires. Struck at his core, Dorn's shame turned to rage, and he loudly threatened Kaoru with the goddess's punishment. In that moment, the atmosphere around Kaoru changed. She showed no fear. Instead, she displayed a radiant yet bone-chilling smile. "The goddess's punishment?" She repeated the priest's threat, her eyes flashing with the sharp gaze of one who wielded true power. "Is it something like this, I wonder?" That challenging rhetorical question signaled that the church's people were about to experience the true wrath of the goddess's friend. And this time, there would be no leniency for those who invoked divine names to commit evil. Amidst the chaotic scene of dust and earth-shattering explosions, a devastating message was sent. Those who dared to offend the angel immediately faced retribution. While the soldiers and priests of the temple were still in extreme panic at the destructive power descending upon the carriage from above, in a hidden corner, Nagase Kaoru stood with a satisfied smirk. In her hand was not a magic staff, but the confidence of one who possessed modern chemical knowledge. What had just exploded was not divine lightning, but a compound similar to nitroglycerin, created by her using her cheat ability. Kaoru thought to herself, "Who will the goddess punish, I wonder?" She had turned this spectacle into a perfect deterrent. Don't mess with the goddess's close friend. News of the explosion spread like wildfire, morphing into terrifying rumors throughout the capital. People whispered that the temple had committed a grave offense by attempting to abduct the angel, causing goddess Celestine to become enraged and deliver a punitive strike. The royal palace was shaken. The young king and Prince Serge trembled as they turned back to old historical records. Several hundred years ago, Celestine's wrath had completely wiped a nation off the map. Fear enveloped the ruling class, transforming Kaoru from a target to be courted into a ticking time bomb that needed to be protected at all costs, but absolutely not provoked. However, approaching Kaoru was now next to impossible. She had erected an absolute defensive wall with her past negative experiences. The message sent to the king was uncompromising. She would not set foot in the castle, nor would she obey orders from any royal family member or high-ranking noble. The reason given stunned the entire court into humiliated silence. The gate guards had once demanded she compromise her integrity for passage. Kaoru's solemn oath before the goddess never to return to that defiled place had become an inviolable decree. As luck would have it, Viscount Lyotel, who was not a high-ranking noble and had a good relationship with Kaoru previously, suddenly became the only bridge between the angel and the powers that be. Unable to use force or commands, both the royal family and the temple were forced to back down, agreeing to sit at the negotiating table on Kaoru's terms. An unprecedented conference was held publicly in the Grand Plaza, at the foot of the goddess Celestine's statue, witnessed by thousands of citizens. Kaoru stepped out, fearless under the scrutinizing gazes of the high-ranking officials. She took the initiative from the very first moments, posing a challenging question. Why was a commoner like her summoned by those who had never cared about the lives and deaths of ordinary people? When the royal family stammered about inviting the angel to the palace as a matter of course, Kaoru dealt a strong blow to their governing philosophy. She coldly declared that governing the country and protecting its territory were the obvious duties of the king and nobles in exchange for taxes and power, not some great favor for which she should be indebted. Furthermore, she flatly denied being a subordinate or messenger of Celestine. To the astonishment of the entire clergy and court, Kaoru calmly revealed a shocking truth. "I am not a follower of Celeste. We are equal friends." The declaration was like a bolt from the blue. The concept of a human being on par with a deity was beyond the imagination of the inhabitants of this world. Kaoru delivered another psychological blow by explaining about polytheism and animism in her homeland, where Celestine was merely one of many administrators. She sternly warned that any attempt to force her to do something against her will would lead to devastating punishment from her hot-headed close friend. Not just that individual, but their entire family, faction, and country would suffer the consequences. Silence enveloped the plaza, the most powerful faces in the kingdom now pale and utterly dismayed at the prospect of annihilation. Amidst the intense atmosphere, Kaoru still maintained her playful spirit, glancing at the statue of the goddess Celestine and silently complaining that the statue's bust had been sculpted with an overly prominent appearance compared to the original. The contrast between her destructive power and her whimsical personality made the young girl even more unpredictable and formidable in the eyes of the local people. At the end of the conference, Kaoru believed she had established a secure position. She had intimidated her enemies and profited from openly selling medicine without anyone daring to rob her. Kaoru left in an elated mood, dreaming of an easy, wealthy, and peaceful life. She believed she had solved all her problems. However, she was too naive. Man proposes, God disposes, and the presence of an angel capable of granting miracles and punishing nations could not possibly be confined within the borders of a single country. In the distance, other powerful forces had begun to stir. The military empire of Arrigo was craving power to revive its economy. The Holy Kingdom of Rueda, the world's center of faith, could not ignore someone claiming to be a friend of God. And even the kingdom of Brancott, which she had just escaped, was stirring. Kaoru thought she was entering a holiday paradise, but in reality she had just ignited a continent-wide power struggle. This peaceful world was beginning to crack. And the epicenter of that earthquake was none other than the small girl named Nagase Kaoru.